Okay. Well, good morning, Dan. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hey, good morning. I'm great. Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm super excited to have you on. You and your son have been doing a ton of stuff on Facebook lately. I went on and checked on some of your lives that you've done, and you did a big challenge lately. So you got a lot going on. You have a lot of things we can talk about today, in addition to your, parenting journey. Can you tell me a little bit about your son?
Well, thanks. Yeah, of course. Actually, I feel like we're breaking a little ground here, April, because I did some homework on your episodes and got a chance to listen to a few of them. Am I like the first male? Are we breaking
Yeah.
ground?
Well, technically, I recorded some with my husband, but I
Oh,
haven't really been satisfied with the way they came out. So you're the first one that's actually going to get like released to the public. But yes,
holy cow.
it is exciting. I'm
It
like
is.
dads have been a little more hesitant to jump on the bandwagon to share their story. And I don't know what that is. I just I'm excited that you have you here today and have a little diversity in the
Well,
episode.
there you go. Sure, it's a good way of looking at it. Diversity. So,
Yeah.
well, thanks. Yeah. So, Jack is a teenager. He's 16 years old, and he's highly functioning for what he has. We discovered, and I'm a single dad, so his mom is we're divorced but can co-parent, and he's a happy kid. And we kind of knew something was up in his younger years, and he got diagnosed in 2015. So I guess he was about 10 at the time, and he's just with chromosome 18. So it's the actual medical term is 18p deletion, which essentially means when your chromosomes split and pair, part of his number 18 deleted, and some of it combined with chromosome 21. And so if it's a chromosome, it can represent 78 million different pairs of DNA. That ultimately the DNA is the gene, and there's about 263 genes in chromosome 18. And I'm not a medical expert, but we quickly learned on something we've never even heard of. And so that's a little bit about that. But Jack is fun, happy, creative, highly functioning for what he has. And that's essentially where I was going with when you asked the question. Did you freeze? There you are. Can you hear me? You're on mute, I think. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it kicked me
There
out
we
and
go.
came back, and I didn't get much of that answer. So maybe we won't use this for IGTV unless I
Most of
learn
the
how
answer
to
didn't come
edit.
over.
Yeah,
I
I'll
was
have to
like,
learn
man,
how to edit.
you're a good listener. I was waiting for you to respond.
I've been working on my listening skills, actually. Try not to interrupt too much, but yeah, I got a little too quiet there. So the last thing I heard from you was that you got the diagnosis for Jack in 2015 when he was 10 years old, and you were explaining the diagnosis, and I really kind of lost your feed. So I hate to ask you to repeat.
The diagnosis, we, at the time we were married, noticed, there were some delays with Jack. Something seemed a little off. Really started at an early age when he was 22 months when he walked for the first time. And so it was extraordinarily delayed. And I remember talking with his mom saying, I just have a feeling one day he's just going to get up and run. And he did. My friend was visiting from Boston. We had just moved down to Georgia. And Jack got up in the kitchen and ran to his mom. So I was like, look, he's just, slow to develop things and he's processing. And that's essentially what ended up happening was at the age of 3, 4, we were noticing things at age 5. We finally got, we went and had someone kind of evaluate Jack, and it was done through the school system. We live in Georgia in Cobb County. which is an extraordinary school system. So they had set us up to go get it done. And the immediate diagnosis for Jack was autism.
Okay.
And, we knew a little bit about it. It's more well known now versus then, but it was something we were familiar with. And his mom immediately was like, no, it's not autism. I don't see it. So we went and paid for kind of a professional evaluation, and they took a whole week. And within the first day, we sat with the therapist, and she was like, we have ruled out completely Jack's diagnosis earlier that you received of autism. And she says the core for autism, from my perspective, which has now become more medical, is engagement. And she's like, Jack is extremely engaging, and immediately took part to some of the things we were doing as we were evaluating with Jack. So within 2 minutes, I knew that wasn't what it was. So at the end of the evaluation for the week, we got a bunch of feedback: learning process disorder, ADHD, AD, all, attention deficit, a bunch of these things. So it was a little later in life that we finally got blood work and got his genes looked at. And that's when we discovered in 2015 that Jack had this rare chromosome abnormality called 18p deletion. And I think, again, I'm not a medical professional, but it's so rare. I think there's only 68,000 cases reported globally.
Okay.
And just here in Georgia, which is where we reside, I'm only familiar with 3 families. We're one of them.
Oh, there's 3 in Georgia?
That are reported that I'm aware of. There might be more. But there's roughly, I think, about 68,000 globally, again, reported.
Yes, of course. Because, with Jack, it took you till he was 10 to get that diagnosis. So who knows? There's probably a lot, or misdiagnosed. They accept the initial diagnosis. What led you guys to go forward with the blood work when he was older?
Well, it's something, I thought greatly of getting a deeper dive, because again, most of what we were getting evaluations on was external. And our pediatrician at the time, the office that we went to, there was some turnover. So we didn't really have a consistent pediatric doctor for Jack. It, really wouldn't go anymore in maybe a year and a half. And finally we got one, and we kind of felt like there needed to be a deeper dive. So we finally moved forward on it, and we did it in Atlanta at Emory and had it done there. And I remember waiting, like we were both waiting in the doctor's office for the diagnosis. And she comes kind of swinging in and says, your son, literally, you've hit the jackpot, no pun intended, because my son's name is Jack, with Jack. And she started to talk, and I heard chromosome 18, blah, 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 blah. And I just went into a fog. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. And my mind began to race. Like, what does this mean for his future? What does this mean for him now? What did that mean before we got him diagnosed? What, is there a cure? Like all these things. So I immediately joined the Chromosome 18 Registry and Research Society, which ironically is in Texas. I don't know how close you are to, but they're based out of San Antonio. I don't know if that's near you guys. Are you more like near Fort Worth?
No, I'm in California actually, but I grew up in Texas.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Right. Okay. So you grew up in Texas. So I jumped on the website, became a member, and found that there was another family in Georgia. So I reached out to them, and ironically, they had a son the same age as Jack. And that's when, the education began for us. And, that stuck in my head what the doctor said, like he hit the jackpot, and I didn't know what she meant. And nor did I know much of what this new diagnosis for our son was going to mean for him in his future. And then I went to their first conference, which ironically was in San Antonio in 2016. And immediately when I walked in the hotel room, because it's like a 4-day conference or 5-day conference, and you could see all the families in the lobby, it hit me. I was like, I get it. And she was so right. We are so blessed with Jack. He's highly functioning for what he has. And he's grown a lot. He's done extraordinarily well since being diagnosed, and some of the challenges we've had to deal with from the age of, 5, 6, 10 to now 16.
So you've told me his diagnosis, but what's Jack's superpower?
Oh, That's a really good one. Um, Creativity. I mean, and just joy. So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
which one I would pick. I mean, he's just a happy, joyful kid, and everything comes from the heart and love. And I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. Like, flip around on the TV, we both like to watch sports. And if I land on like boxing or UFC or wrestling, he's like, Daddy, can you change the channel? So
Yeah.
anything that has to do with physical conflict or violence, he doesn't want any part of. And so his superpower, I guess, would be joy or creativity. He
Those
loves
are
to
good.
make games.
Those are good ones. I saw on one of your videos, he's got a goal of what is it? Major League Wiffle Ball.
There you go. MLW. It's his new
Yeah.
love. Major League Wiffle
So
Ball.
I'm not a sports person, but this is a new creation in his mind, right? This doesn't exist.
Well, it does exist actually, and the league is headquartered out of, I think, Minneapolis, Minnesota. But it is basically baseball with plastic bats and balls. It's very popular with boys growing up. We played it. When I say we, my brother and I, he's a little older than me, our
Yep.
neighborhood friends, all of our friends played wiffle ball. And it was like creating these parks in your backyard to look like Major League Baseball parks and playing wiffle ball. And I introduced it to Jack at the age of 4, and we've been playing ever since. And
So
he just loves it.
he likes it because it's a non-contact sport, huh?
Well, there you go, right? If he takes one off the head, it's not going to hurt, and he can use his hands to play. You know,
Right. Yeah, definitely.
he gets hit by a pitch and he laughs.
It's all about the joy. I think it sounds like he leans more towards joy.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
think so.
is there anything you wish you would have known at the time you got that diagnosis? I guess the official one.
Yeah, it's a really good question because we as a tendency, no matter what might happen in our lives that could be a shift or significant, we want to look back.
Mm.
And my immediate answer to that question would be no. I think everything happened at the time it was supposed to happen. Now, maybe I would have a different answer if I'm not seeing progress with Jack and him working. And some of the struggles as a parent for me with a child with special needs, which was a constant struggle. And I think I just, over time and trial and error, you figure it out. But it's like when there's misbehavior, you're like, is this because he just doesn't know or he can't do, or is he just misbehaving? And I struggled with that. Like, how am I supposed to communicate this to him? And it's a lot of trial and error. I grew up different than as everyone, different generation. The way my parents handled me would never be the way I would handle Jack. It's just the way things are. So it's a lot of trial and error. Go to your room. That was what I had to do. So we've tried that, and I've tried other things. The go to your room didn't work. And then I realized that some of the times he wasn't misbehaving, he just didn't understand, because part of his abnormality with some of the chromosome deletion is processing and development. So a lot of things that, as we have a conversation, we're in rhythm. Jack's a little more delayed, and you have to learn to sit and wait. It's not that he doesn't understand. He hears and understands everything. Just the way he might react and respond to it takes longer. And sometimes he'll bring up a conversation that we had 6 hours earlier, and he'll start talking about it. And I'm like, oh, right. We were talking about that this morning at
Yeah.
breakfast. So it's
Yes,
things like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a particular memory of Jack that's your favorite?
All the time. I mean, seeing him, there's so many, and it's the one that hasn't happened yet that I'm most excited about. And the one that when we were last together that happened, that is most memorable to me now. But there is something that, you wonder about having a child with special needs. And it's hard to hang your hat on one thing, but of the one that I found has been very helpful for him is confidence. And I think when the confidence instills, that helps a lot for many people, right? But especially for, as you're parenting a child with special needs. So one story comes to mind as you ask that question is, he was in 4th grade and he came home, as they do with their folder and all the paperwork from school, and he pulled one out of his folder. And this is a little bit unlike him. He's can be passive about certain things. pulls it out, puts it on the table. And I noticed it said talent show. And I look and I'm like, oh, it's a registration form. I'm like, oh, how about this, buddy? It looks like a talent form from the school. And he told me where he got it. And I said, it's great. So, what do you want to do with it? And he's like, I want to enter to do the competition. I'm like, great. What are you going to do? He's like, I want to sing the national anthem. I'm like, great. So we filled out the form. We sent it in. He went through the trials and rehearsals. He didn't make it to, the big night that they have at the school. But he went through it. And you could see so this is an example of maybe my answer is the building blocks of confidence, whether it's trying a talent show and not making it, to that building confidence, to some of the kids he hangs around with, which we always talk about, your circle is everything. Be careful who's in your circle and who you hang around with. And we've been very fortunate because these kids that are around Jack they're incredible. I mean, they're kind, they look out for him, and they do all the right things. And they're super athletes. I look back at when I grew up, and at the time we were separated, right? They went in a different room. We went to class. We never saw him till the end of the day. To have him integrated with these kids really means the world. And that really kind of is a little bit of a, tipping my hat to the county we live here in Georgia, in Cobb County, that they've done a really great job to integrate these kids and train the educational system.
So Jack's in the typical quote unquote classroom, or mainstream, I guess is the better word, full time.
Correct.
Was he ever in a special needs classroom?
Yes. We did, he would split. So he would have, if he had 5 classes, he would do 2 in the special needs room and then 3 with, general. And then he had a co-pair that would get him to the classrooms. And again, back to your question, seeing him grow out of that is, another great building block in memory. So yeah, that was a big struggle for him was elementary school. I remember, so where I live is about 26 miles north of Atlanta, and I worked in Atlanta. And second grade, first, second grade into third grade, my phone was close to me because I'm like, when am I getting the call? It's coming. He's under his desk. He's having a meltdown. And at the time, the teachers didn't have that resource to help them understand how to, accept and work with those kids within the classroom. It became disruptive and it was hard for them. And I understood it, but it was a burden for me or mom to have to leave work, go pick him up and talk with the assistant principal, who ended up being a really good guardian for him. But then you grow out of that, and now he's mainstreamed, and he's a sophomore in high school, and he got all A's his freshman year, and he's on track to get all A's this semester, and he loves school, and he has a small group of friends, but when you talk to him about his friends, it's incorporated with teachers too. And he has a really special relationship with every one of his teachers.
That's really cool.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So you saw his confidence grow as he became part of the mainstream program. Did you see any other changes with Jack as he came into the mainstream program at school?
Yeah, a lot of it was confidence, driven, that he could do, and the co-pair kind of just phased out, and he was doing things on his own. Just little things like just getting to the classroom on time, transitioning, which has always been a struggle for Jack. Anything to do with transition was always hard. So when now you're in a classroom and you got to leave to go to your next class and make it before a bell went off, from a sensory standpoint, that was incredibly overwhelming. Walking in the hallways, narrow hallways, everyone's rushing to get to class, was really hard for him. And it took a whole semester, but he accomplished it, and then he didn't need someone to walk him to class. And he would, start this game where I want to be the first one there. So, and he did better, with planning. So you see these milestones. It was really interesting.
It is. And so many layers on top of what they're learning academically, right? The navigation, all the practical, life skills,
Yeah, really well put. And then, and you don't realize, as I'm telling you that story of him walking the hallways, you put that in perspective, really how hard that is for him. You don't really think about that sometimes because you kind of overlook it and forget it, that that is a huge stress point for
Mhm.
him because it can put the senses on overdrive. And, the way to manage that for him was always hard. And he's grown out of that. Thank God.
And I'm sure there's like a layer of anticipation that distracts from the school day too. Like this thing is coming at the end of the period and kind of like maybe some stress about that that's keeping him from focusing on the academic part.
Perfect. Yeah, that's so well put. And again, the transition, right? And recognizing that he knows it's coming up. And the teachers, as he started to graduate and go to various schools, you could see that process was getting better because the teachers got an education on how to incorporate these kids and manage them in the classroom. So
Mhm.
here in Georgia, we have, it's called the Marcus Autism Center, and it was developed by Bernie Marcus. I don't know if you might recognize the name, but he and Arthur Blank. Arthur Blank owns the Atlanta Falcons, which is a little more recognizable name. But Bernie in the late 70s, so Bernie and Arthur started a small little retail shop called Home Depot, which
Mm.
is based here in Atlanta. They're both from New England or the Northeast. And they came down here and started this little orange retail shop called Home Depot. And it's interesting because they've both done amazing things in the community. Bernie's give back was building this Marcus Autism Center in the late 70s. So I bring this up because it was mid 2000s, maybe 2010-ish or so. They hired a lady called Emily Rubin. And Emily, and it was kind of her vision on this, was explaining that the research is worldwide and known within the Marcus Autism Center. However, we need to take that out to communities to help integrate these individuals with autism and sensory needs. So Emily literally went to the school systems and went county by county in Georgia to train faculty how to blend these kids into the classroom and make it a success for everyone. And she would spend an entire year in that county working with the schools, let go, move to another county, year two, they'd do more documentation and stay in touch. Well, I bring this up because when Jack graduated elementary school, they go to middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. He went to Autry Middle School, which was one of the first schools that Emily trained.
Mhm.
And it was night and day. And this
Mhm.
was the biggest shift for Jack when he went to that school, and how they just engaged with him and the faculty. And as I kind of joked earlier, but they are his friends. We still invite them to come over to the house to barbecue with us and hang out and watch baseball and football. And that was a huge shift for us. And we're very lucky to have that resource here in Georgia.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds amazing. Yeah, you're sometimes the therapists and the people that are involved in supporting them become part of your, extended family, right?
No, no doubt, because we all know this. You can't do it alone. You really need an army around yourself. And it's great that some of us are blessed to have family that are
Mhm.
present geographically for us to do that. But you also need to extend that. You need more, tentacles to who's in your army to help, because it takes a multiple of people, from OT to people like Emily to faculty to pediatricians to a neighbor, and professional help. So we've been very fortunate because there are a lot of resources here in Georgia.
So you've mentioned quite a few resources. Are there any other major resources that have helped you guys in your journey?
Yeah, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, from a physical standpoint, doing OT and PT for Jack, hands down, has been incredible. The Obviously the Chromosome 18 registry and research society on San Antonio, Texas, has been tremendous resource for us. And the school system, which, as I mentioned earlier, going to work in Atlanta, being 26 miles away when he's in third grade, going, when am I getting the call? You start to think about, am I going to have to put him in private school?
Mhm.
And we stuck with the public system. And as I mentioned, when he went to 6th grade at Autry, it was a shift. It was huge. So, the Marcus Autism Center, great resource. People like Emily, things like that have been really helpful. And we have a pediatrician now that's been at East Cobb Pediatrics now for 8 years. So to have some sustainable doctors around Jack and seeing him growing up was super huge.
Was any of the physicians or therapists, had they had experience with the chromosome 18 diagnosis?
No, no. But,
Or-
it was Jack's mom, and it was really the right idea. Is when we, had to communicate to the school, what is it about Jack? It was all prior to getting the diagnosis through the blood work. It was all the ADHD, learning process disorder, all these things. So no one really kind of had a name for it. So we were like, look, he's on the spectrum. And you would think, there's a lot of commonalities. So it was labeled that Jack has, he's on the spectrum, and that helped a little bit to get the resources within the school around him,
Mhm.
from doing IP reports to, different documentation that would be helpful for Jack's future as now he's grown and is succeeding in school. So yeah, that was huge, really, really big that we were able to kind of, you don't want to put a label on people, but that helped define something so that resources could be in place for him to take advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That sometimes it's a trade-off. Is there
Sure.
anything is there anything you'd like people to know about Jack?
Um, I'm going to sound like a proud dad, but
It's
I
okay.
hear it all the time. I'll get text messages or emails or phone calls. It's in his presence, there's a light, and people recognize it and they gravitate towards him. And it's interesting. And I don't maybe recognize it as much because he's with me all the time.
Mhm.
But when I get the feedback from other folks, little things from like an email from his teacher, or the big run that I did,
Mhm.
the 1880. And for the first time, that was really the first time that I went to create something to raise awareness for Jack's 18p deletion and try to do something significant. And the response from the people was just humbling. It was unreal. And one thing that really, there's a bunch of stories that stick out. But one was my tenant in my house. We got talking about it one day, and the run was over, and we were raising money. And he's like, "Well, no, I didn't know about this." And he the next day dropped off a check for $500.
Oh, wow.
And I called him, and I'm like, "Mike, this was extraordinary. Thank you." And we got talking, but he went into this like 5-minute discussion about Jack. He's like, "I've only met him a couple times. One of the times he was in a superhero outfit. He went to as Halloween for Spider-Man." And these are stories he's telling me from like 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 11 years ago. And the fact that he was talking about it like it happened yesterday is an example of kind of the impact that Jack makes around people. And I'm blessed. I mean, he just is incredible. So it's just little things like that is um, to know Jack is to know Jack. Like to meet Jack is to know
Mhm.
Jack. And doing the videos was something we'd never done. Actually, episode 1, we actually put the camera up. And I think I even say it to him as he's kind of scooting up next to me. I'm like, "Well, Jack, this is a first." We've never gotten on a video before and pushed it out to, you know, on a social platform like Facebook.
Mhm.
There's photos of us, there's things like that, but it was very vulnerable for me to do that. But I felt like it was the step I needed to take to show people Jack and his personality, but also a demonstration that how blessed we are to have Jack, and other families aren't as fortunate, and just hopefully at a minimum give them hope and just have something for them to hold on to, because there isn't a cure for what they have.
So you guys had quite a bit of fun doing the Facebook series. I saw a few of them. I was watching them this morning to get a little bit more of a feel for your personality and Jack's personality, and it looked like he really warmed up to it. And so I understand you started that to raise awareness for the event that you were doing, right?
Correct.
And do you want to just explain the event that you did and how much money you guys raised, or tell me a little bit about the success of it?
Yeah, thanks. So, again, Jack was diagnosed in 2015. Every year they have an annual conference that we go to. Year 1, I went solo to check it out and make sure that as it would be appropriate for Jack to come with me the following year. So we've gone 2016, 17, 18, 19. Obviously things happened. In 20, we didn't go. And I always had this guilt trip going on the trip and coming back. And that was,
Mhm.
when am I going to do something to recognize this incredible organization, this family, these group of people? That I mentioned earlier, when I walked in the lobby that day and thought of the doctor that said, you hit the jackpot because I get to see all the other families. I was welcomed immediately. And so years had passed, and I'm like, I've got to do something significant. So with the pandemic, as we've all had many life changes, for me, obviously, I spent a lot of time trying to take care of myself and going to the gym. Gym shut down, couldn't do that anymore. Started working out in my garage, got bored with the body weight workouts after 2 months, and started doing something I hate to do, and that was run. And, it went from like running just about barely a mile to stretching myself to get to 3 miles and thinking, if I got to double digits, that would be amazing. So this really started around April, late March, early April of 2020.
Mhm.
So I did the 4x4x48 with Goggins, his whole 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 straight hours. I did that in October, and it
Wow.
gave me a lot of confidence to trying to do something bigger. And that's when this came to mind. I'm like, it's time to start recognizing chromosome 18 and 18p deletion. And how can I use the number 18 and create something significant? I'm like, 18 miles really isn't much. That's not going to get people to move. That's not moving the needle. So I'm like, what about 80 miles? Because I'm like, I got to have an 8 in there. And so I started to think about it. I'm like, let's try to do 80 miles in 18 hours. So I made the announcement, I think it was in February, to do this 1880. And that was accomplish going 80 miles in less than 18 hours. And I started training really hard for it. And I'm not really a runner, but I was hoping to become a runner on that day. So we did it on April 18, tried to keep a theme of 18. I reached out to the Chromosome 18 Registry and Research Society and said, here's what I'm going to do. Can you build a page? They're like, absolutely. So then it launched on my social media, and I'm like, I guess I'm committed. Here we go.
That's a good way
And
to get yourself accountable.
no doubt accountability was now cemented, and it was ready to go. So I'm like, all right, well, where am I going to do this? So I started like mapping it out. I'm like, well, I live in Kennesaw. Athens, which is a popular area, is 82 miles. I'll just have my friends and family meet me there. And 2 days later, I'm like, that is the most ridiculous idea because my body's going to break down. I don't want to be 62 miles away from my house on a strange road and my phone's not working. So it just by chance things worked out. A half mile from my house, they were building a new commuter lot. It's like a carpool bus shuttle lot, huge parking lot, gigantic area. And I found myself starting to train through there and around my neighborhood. So I'm like, why don't I just do it in there? It's a confined area. So I started mapping out these different runs in the parking lot, and the math worked. It was like a lap to go 0.41 miles. Did the math. I'm like, I'm gonna have to run around this thing 195 times.
Oh, wow.
That's insane, but it's one day, keep things in perspective. So we launched it, fundraising started to happen. I felt like it started to slow down a little bit, and I put $18,000 as the goal, thinking maybe that's crazy, but I've got to keep a theme of 1800's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to think, maybe there's a time to start telling the story about Jack and doing these videos. So that's when they started. And we ended up doing probably about 17 episodes before the run. And then I did one on the final episode, I think, before my run was a bunch of photos of him at the conferences with his friends
Mm-hmm.
and kind of highlighted the families. So ran things through social, tagging a bunch of groups and things of that nature. And it was unbelievable, April. I was humbled. I think we were at $12,000 when I started running at 5:01 a.m. on Sunday, April 18th. And by noon on Monday, we were just about there. We had raised
Wow.
almost six, it was $4,900 in less than a 18-hour period. And I'm like, we are less than $1,000 away. And the whole time, Jack and I kept talking about the significance of 21,
Mm-hmm.
because again, part of it is 18 deleted, but some of it combined with 21. And I'm like, am I going to finish it 10:21 or what's going to happen? So Lord and behold, I couldn't believe it. On Wednesday, April 21st at noon, we hit the goal. So I'm like, well, there's the 21. So we got $18,000 And then the next night, as part of our group, with the BYLR community, our challenge for the month was do a plank on the date, as you know, and we had a call on Thursday night and people got talking about this. One of the members in the group, Robin, who was literally doing the plank without breaking. And this was going into the 20th of April to go 20 straight minutes. So in the group call, they were like, I'll tell you what, I'll throw $30. And if you're going to keep doing this, and I'll match that. And she's like, holy cow, this is very generous. And they're like, well, what's your charity, Robin? What are you going to do? And the next morning she posted and picked us. And it just, talk about being humbled. And we got to almost $23,000.
Amazing.
Yeah, she put it way over the top. And there it was. I couldn't believe it. And the stories from the journey, I could just go on and on.
It's just such a significant thing. I think the way that you posted all those videos to, you know, share Jack's light with people, and that you raised so much money for his organization out of just an idea. I think that's so significant on so many levels.
Yeah, it just, I guess it's a reminder of what we've been told and we hear, but we don't believe. And that is, we can do more, you know, to think I'm going to go 80 miles. You know, if someone said that to me 9 months prior to April, I'd be 6 months prior to April, I'd be like, you're crazy. When I made the announcement, I'm like, this is crazy. And I kept thinking, I don't know if I'm going to finish, but I'm going to try. And at a minimum, we raise some awareness. Maybe we get to 18,000, maybe we don't, but you just got to put yourself out there, because we are capable for more than what we think. We really are. There's so much, you know, that is in there. And when you become committed and determined to it, it happens. And then you get humbled, like getting to almost $23,000 just blew me away. And again, it was another reminder that you can't do it alone. You know, I had folks that came at the right time, some that stayed, I had 2 gals that stayed with me pretty much the whole time. And I joked and called them my sports therapist, but they were the ones that kept me hydrated. They reminded me to come in to eat and, you know, get fueled up. There were 2 times they came up to me, threw me down on the ground and stretched me out, because there were moments where I was like, I don't know, like the pain was moving around everywhere in my body. And it would go from like my ankle on my right foot to, you know, my quad on my left leg to my calf. So it was just another testament to, you know, having people around you and doing things together and having one common goal and mission, and you can do more than you think.
So what kept you going to finish when you had told yourself it would be okay if you just raised awareness?
Because I got to wake up the next morning and look at myself in the mirror. And if I look at that man in the mirror, I want him to say that, you know, I did it. I want him to say, I don't know if I could have done it. I want him to say, I didn't do it. I ended up in the hospital. I don't know. Like, it was funny because at the moment, you know, some of the folks that stayed with me most of the day were like, I could feel, you know, them like, come on, just finish. And this was like at 8:00 at night. And they're like, hey, just, you know, what do you say? I'm like, no, I'm doing this. You know, we realized that I ended up doing it. The last 3 hours I walked, but for the majority I ran. But I ended up doing an extra lap that we ended up figuring out later. But, you know, I think keeping things simple too, because if you can get overwhelmed looking at the number and going, I'm going to go 80 miles, that is absurd. And then I broke it down. I'm like, I've got 18 hours to do this. And then I broke it down to, well, I got to go 4.4 miles an hour will get me to the 80 miles in 18 hours. So why not just focus on each hour? And that's what I did. I'm like, just win the hour. That was my theme. Win the hour, win the hour, win the hour, win the hour. And I had a hell of a streak. We had a hell of a streak going. You know, I think I got 11 out of 12 hours or 12 out of 13 hours won. And I knew at that point, I'm like, I got it. And we ended up finishing early, and I got to walk, you know, a good couple hours towards the end. But just having people show up, you know, and I'm in a parking lot, they just park their car, they see me going around, they get out, they walk, run with me. There were moments that I was like, I think I'm done. And then my friend from high school shows up. Now I grew up in the Northeast, who now lives down here in Decatur. She shows up with her twins, and she's like, her daughter twins, like, let's go. I'm going with you. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
But she
that's
helped me
fuel.
run like 12 more laps, and just keep going.
Yeah,
And it's just
fuel
those
for sure.
moments during the day that, yeah, the people came at the right time and did and said the right things. And that's just the way it went.
I bet that you'll, have that memory always.
Yeah, well, it was more than a Masogi, as you and I know what the Masogis are all about. It just was incredible. And
Mhm.
humanity, and just put hope back for humanity, because there's been so much, I don't want to say dark, but really uncertain things that have been going on since, some time. And
Mhm.
to see people step up, like, just it was incredible.
Yeah, I think people are, searching for that and hungry for that. So
Yeah. And
creating that opportunity was also a gift.
and it's what you're doing, which I commend you,
Yes.
April, for. I was like, holy cow, she does this podcast for parents with special needs. How amazing. So the fact that you've done this, and congratulations, I guess you're going into what, year 2?
Oh no. This
Season
is
2?
about I
Or
just started at the beginning of January,
well, you
so
just
still in the
started. It's
first year.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been fun. I'm enjoying it. I think it's providing something for people that, focusing on the positive, the lessons, the joys, along with the hardships, but definitely focusing on the positive parts of it and
It's a
the
gift.
support. Hmm.
It's really incredible what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I would like to know what you think your greatest lesson from parenting Jack is.
Patience.
Yeah, that's a common one.
Patience. And it's something I always struggled with for many years. The greatest compliment I get is I'm a great dad. And I just, I sit there and go, yeah, well, it's him. you know, he's made me the great dad. He's the one that challenges me every day. He's the one I learn from. He's the
Mhm.
one that gives me these lessons every day. And, as parents, we don't bat 1,000 in baseball terms, or we don't always get it right. But the more times we get it right, the more times things will be better. And it's a lot of trial and error. But for me, for Jack, I've always been kind of on the go and what's next. And he has put me in the moment because he lives in the
Mhm.
moment. And it's a beautiful gift. And I guess it's the reason why it's called a present, right? That he has taught me a lot about patience. And every day I learn from him. It's been an incredible
Really
journey.
cool. Do you have any other advice for other parents?
Um, Follow your gut. I've done this, and I'll be vulnerable. There have been nights or days where things were hard, and you're like, I was horrible to him today. And I finally, you hold yourself off, you get him to bed, and you go in your room and you shut the door, and then you go in your closet and shut the door, and I just sit there and just cry. And like, I really screwed this up.
Mhm.
Don't be hard on yourself, and follow your gut and know that it's okay to make mistakes. The majority of the time, you're going to get it right. He is your child, and don't listen to some of the outside things that people might say or judge you with. It's your gut. You know what's right, and in the long term, that's the most important thing. Like at the moment, sometimes you might screw it up, but trust me, in 3 months, a year, 3 years, that moment was the right moment. You did it right, and that's why they're there and where they are today, because of those many moments that you did get right. And be kind to yourself and follow your gut.
I also think sometimes those mistakes we make are a good opportunity to have a discussion, with the
I love that
children.
you said that. And that's
I
one of the things I learned is apologizing. Like the next morning,
mhm.
having breakfast and saying, I got to tell you something, Jack. Daddy didn't handle this well. And here's what I could have done better. And then he'll listen and be like, well, here's what I could have done better. You're right.
Mhm.
It does open up that. And that's where maybe the bigger lessons start to be coming together. It's a
Yeah,
really good
I
point.
saw someone post on Facebook the other day, let's normalize apologizing to our children. And I was like, that's not normal. I apologize to them all the time.
All the time. So do I. And I learned from a therapist that that's good. He also told me it's all right to cry around him. I'm like, really?
Mhm.
It's just, he's right.
Yeah. To let them see you be human, you're not gonna hide
Yep.
that part of your humanity away.
So true.
So
Yep.
what do you feel like, I know that parenting Jack has changed you as a person. So how would you describe that change?
Less anxiety,
Yeah. Is
less
that from
anxiety,
being,
more confidence in the process than what's happening in the moment, and take advantage of the moments that really bring you joy, and understand the difference between the two, and know that there's a long game,
Mhm.
you know, so play the long game.
Okay. Do you have thoughts on the future right now? Anything you're looking forward to in your future and Jack's future?
Us getting another place together, him going to college, me getting a place near the school he's going to go to.
Uh-huh.
He wants to go to Georgia Tech. Kennesaw State University is another one he wants to go to, which is a great fallback. It's a hidden gem here in the state of Georgia, great school. And it doesn't matter to me. You know, I just want him to continue having joy, giving joy, feeling it, and stay his purpose and what he wants to do. And he wants to be a meteorologist.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get him as much exposure as I can to that, you know?
Yeah,
So
that's exciting.
yeah, we thought at first when he was really young, he talked about doctor. Then it
Uh-huh.
became doggy doctor. So we were like, vet, he's going to be a vet. And
Uh-huh.
then one day, he's a big Braves fan. We went to opening day, and I noticed a lot with the weather. He seemed to have this love for weather, you know, doing weather maps on the computer, watching weather channel. So I have a friend that worked at the Weather Channel, and we had opening day tickets. And I'm like, hey, if we got there early, I hear you guys do tours. Could we do a tour? And we did. And this was more than a tour. This girl gave Jack an unbelievable experience. And I think since that day, the light bulb went off that he wants to be a meteorologist. So,
Do you feel like he's pretty committed to that?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So trying to figure out things to keep that exposure going, because that's all you can do, right? Just keep giving the exposure.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Keep
someone was
feeding.
asking me the other day, like, what sports does he play? And I'm like, well, I mean, he likes pickleball, wiffle ball, and kickball. You know, I've introduced him to t-ball, soccer,
Mhm.
basketball, golf, karate, and you just got to kind of follow and see where they gravitate towards and what they're going to do. So I
Yeah, where the kind of passion kicks off.
think so. Yeah, it's a funny story along soccer. He went the
Okay.
whole season. He was probably 9 at the time. He went the whole soccer season without kicking the ball. Last game of the season, we're on the sidelines. He's getting ready to go out there with his team. And I reach in my pocket, I pull out a $20 bill and I hold it in front of him. I go, buddy, this $20 bill is yours. He's like, really? I go, hold on. All you got to do is kick the ball once. So he goes out there and the parents look at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, watch. He didn't kick the ball. I put the $20 bill back in my pocket.
Oh,
So I
really?
realized, you know, soccer's not his thing.
He was
So
avoiding it.
yeah, I just ran up and down the field, and he played goalie one game. I think he liked that, but you
Mhm.
realize quickly like soccer's not his thing. So
Mhm. That's fine.
yeah,
Moving on.
we'll move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, is there any common misconception that you want to debunk about his diagnosis, having, a child with special needs, anything along those lines?
What a really great question. Um, misconceptions, I think, when you're around these individuals and you don't think they're paying attention or processing things, that's not true. You know, just
Mhm.
because they might not be giving a reaction for you to confirm that they heard you or saw what you did, they are processing it. And it's important to know that and be patient with that, whatever that might be. They know what's going on. They really do. They might not be communicating it in a way that would confirm that you saw that they understood what you were doing or trying to say to them or get them to react, but they do. And I think the last thing to leave them with is one of my nonprofits. It's called Culture City. It's spelled with a K. We're the
Mhm.
leading nonprofit for acceptance and inclusion for individuals with sensory needs. And it's 1 out of 6 individuals that have this, abnormality, I guess I would use, maybe not or transition, maybe a better word. It's, the movement is going to start happening and needs to be more prevalent, I think. And there are things happening in society now that are making it aware, and that is to accept these individuals and include them more, and
Mhm.
the gifts will be lived. Um, like I said earlier when we started this call, when I grew up, there was a different name for those individuals when I was at school, and they weren't around any of us during the day. They were put in a room, and it was more like a closet. And that's not the way they need to be treated, because they all have a gift, and that gift will never be lived unless we include them, accept them, and give them an opportunity. And it'll be amazing what happens.
I mean, 1 in 6, that's tons of
One in
people.
six. Yeah.
And yeah, to think about just increasing awareness, because it's so really mainstream to have sensory issues, and to think about that in the way that things are designed, the environments and the way that, people interact with each other. That's really important. How long have you been involved in that organization?
So it's been a little over about 2.5 years.
Okay.
So yeah, essentially we build, you know, safe spaces in public places. To your point, very well put, April. I
Mhm.
love how you explain that. We train staffs and venues. We have physical space or sensory rooms to kind of, if it gets really triggered and overwhelming, they can go in and kind of decompress. We have bags that you can check out that have
Mhm.
earphones and fidget toys that they can have access to for free, whether that's at a sporting event or Disney on Ice, or, you're at the zoo. These are all venues that we partner with. We have about 650 venue partners.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
definitely I'll definitely link that in the show notes. Is there
I
anything
appreciate it.
else? If you could step in my shoes, is there anything that should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh my gosh, no, this was great, extremely engaging. I hope, the same for you. And
Yes,
again, I,
definitely.
I really, really appreciate what you're doing. You're making a difference.
Well, thank you,
And
Dave.
thank you for having me. This was fun.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. And is there anywhere you'd like people to connect with you online?
Good question. I'm working on that right now. You can find me on LinkedIn, I guess.
Okay.
But on Facebook, if there's a way you want to connect, maybe my LinkedIn, that would be great.
Okay. Awesome.
I'm transitioning my career as well. So I had a
Yeah. What?
dream job for many years, and now I'm going to go do my own thing. So it's an exciting time. Thank you, April.
That is. Good luck with everything. And thank you for
Uh,
your time today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Have a great day. Bye.
You too. Bye.